Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're stepping straight through the front door of an 1876 Victorian home. But we aren't here for the pristine, romanticized illusions of afternoon tea and delicate lace that you so often see in period dramas. Actually, we're going to strip all of that away. We're going to look at the soot-choked, backbreaking, and intensely disciplined machine that sustained everyday human life in the 19th century. We're diving deep into the experiences of the ordinary women who ran this machine, revealing the grueling physical and social realities that were so carefully hidden away behind those heavy velvet curtains. To really understand this world, we first have to grasp the immense psychological weight placed upon Victorian women. Coventry Patmore, in his wildly popular 1854 poem, The Angel in the House, basically demands that a woman must literally fling herself into the gulf of a man's necessities. She was expected to be this earthly angel, right? Perfectly pure, entirely selfless, and eternally pleasant. But as historians, we have to ask a profound question. What did it actually take in blood, sweat, harsh chemicals, and endless soot to maintain this suffocating ideological standard of the perfect wife and mother? Section 1. The Angel in the House, the Ideological Framework of 19th Century Domesticity. So the Victorian era was totally reshaped by the rapid economic transformations of the Industrial Revolution. As work moved out of the home and into centralized factories and offices, society literally fractured into what historians call separate spheres. The bustling, cutthroat public realm of commerce and politics, that became the exclusive domain of men. Meanwhile, the private, domestic realm was designated as the moral sanctuary of women. Women were confined entirely to the household, expected to apply professional-level devotion to their duties, but completely stripped of any professional compensation or independence. It was influential figures like Patmore and the art critic John Ruskin who aggressively constructed this paradigm. They essentially placed the ideal woman on a pedestal, viewing her as a submissive, deeply moral creature whose sole purpose was to protect her husband from the corruptions of the outside world. And this meant enforcing a strict, absolute ignorance of sexuality upon young girls. Marital intimacy was framed purely as a procreative duty, not a source of pleasure. It was an environment of profound forced repression, where a woman's identity was just completely eclipsed by her family. Moving to Section 2, Keepers of the Flame, the sensory and physical reality of household labor. To uphold that angelic illusion, a literal army of laborers had to wake up in the freezing, pitch-black dark. Take the brutal schedule of an under-housemaid. Her day began at 5 a.m. Her very first task was to clean the ashes from the fireplaces without getting dust everywhere. How did she do that? Well, by sprinkling the carpets with damp, used tea leaves to trap the dirt before sweeping. By 7 a.m., she's hauling heavy jugs of boiling water up multiple flights of stairs and emptying the family's chamber pots, scouring them with vinegar. It was a relentless physical marathon that didn't end until well past 10 p.m. And here's the kicker. Before a single drop of water could even be boiled for morning tea, the massive cast-iron kitchen range demanded a filthy, agonizing daily ritual known as blackleading. Maids had to sift the cinders to save precious coal, then mix powdered graphite with cold water into this thick, batter-like paste. Using 3 separate specialized brushes, they'd apply the paste, scrub it deep into the iron, and then vigorously polish it to a gunmetal, rust-resistant gleam. It was a miserable, absolutely exhausting daily necessity just to coax a little warmth into the home. This is a perfect illustration of what historians call the paradox of progress. You see, we usually think of the Industrial Revolution as making life easier, but in the Victorian home, it actually created way more work. The introduction of indoor gas lighting and coal ranges filled the house with toxic, sulfurous fumes and a greasy, dark soot that clung to absolutely everything. Because wallpaper and books were so expensive, housewives had to develop these creative, non-chemical methods to clean them. They would literally press stale white bread into malleable balls and rub them across delicate wallpaper and picture frames to lift the grime without damaging the paint. I mean, can you imagine doing that today? Let's look at Section 3, the tyranny of wash day, the punishing physicality of 19th century laundry. If you thought blackleading was bad, Wash Day Monday was an absolute nightmare of Victorian domestic life. Because it required so much fuel and water, laundry was heavily consolidated. It essentially turned the home into a steamy, chemical-filled factory for 2 days straight. First, women and children had to manually haul dozens of gallons of water from outdoor street pumps. Then, they heated it in huge copper boilers over a fire. They'd agitate the clothes in boiling water using harsh, skin-burning lye soap and a heavy wooden plunger called a pauser. Just imagine the sensory hardship here. The burning lungs, the cracked, bleeding hands, the sheer muscular exhaustion of cranking heavy, wet linens through a mechanical mangle. It was completely brutal.
Which brings us to Section 4, the strict code of calling, the administrative and social labor of the mistress.
While the servants were engaged in that backbreaking manual labor, the middle-class mistress of the house was performing exhausting administrative and social labor. Make no mistake, the home was run like a highly disciplined enterprise. Just comparing their mornings. While the housemaid is up at 5 a.m. lighting fires and emptying chamber pots at 7, the mistress is inspecting the kitchen and issuing daily orders by 9:30 a.m. By 10:30, she's balancing budgets and managing household accounts. And then her entire afternoon was consumed by these strict, mandatory rituals of formal visiting. The mistress was essentially the CEO of this domestic machine, networking constantly to secure her family's social standing. This networking all revolved around the Victorian calling card, which operated as a silent, highly complex language. You couldn't just drop by a friend's house. You had to present the card to a servant. And if the lady of the house wasn't receiving visitors, you left the card behind, but you folded specific corners to communicate your intent. Folding the upper right corner meant you delivered it in person. Upper left meant congratulations. Lower left was for condolence. This tiny piece of paper communicated a subtle, unmistakable social intelligence without a single spoken word. And here's a wild detail. A respectable woman never ever printed her address on the card. Only prostitutes did that. Every single detail was a landmine of social etiquette. Finally, Section 5, the Victorian domestic machine, deconstructing the myth of the work-free sanctuary. So the crucial point is this. When we synthesize all of this historical evidence, the damp tea leaves, the burning lye soap, the complex calling card codes, a really profound truth emerges. The Victorian home was never the peaceful, work-free sanctuary that poems like The Angel in the House claimed it was. It was a site of professional domesticity. It was a relentless, highly structured machine that demanded immense physical strength from the working class and intense administrative discipline from the middle class. And all of this was just to maintain the illusion of moral purity and social respectability in an increasingly dirty, industrialized world. As we step back out of that 1876 home and return to the present day, we really have to marvel at the sheer resilience of these ordinary women. They navigated a world structurally designed to limit their potential, yet they completely mastered the complex chemistry, economics, and social strategies required to keep their families alive and thriving. It leaves us with a pretty provocative question to ponder. As we look around at our own spotless, technologically advanced homes today, what hidden labors and what unseen societal architectures are currently supporting the illusions of our own modern lives? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the past, and I'll see you next time.